he's an attorney, fellow brethren, and he's got a Ph.D. Who does that? Right? Who does that? That being said, he's also the insignia group's evaluator, and he's truly an evaluator that isn't just doing that piece, but he's an advisor, and he's genuinely concerned about the men in our program and always wanting what's best for them. So with that being said, please give a warm Southernmost Illinois welcome to Dr. J.
Thank you, man. Boy, I just expect my picture out here. It's pretty cool. First of all, man, he always get me following people with powerful stories, and especially ministers. I just can't beat that.
Yeah.
But
you are on par with idiots.
But I'd like to thank y'all for inviting me down here in Southern Illinois, and I'm hoping we'll have more of a discussion on this issue of restorative justice. Before I get started, I'm going to ask y'all. Yesterday, I told y'all to do some homework. How many of y'all have done your homework? Uh-oh. I kind of figure it's just like my classes, you know. But if you haven't, and if you haven't got the articles, one is Gull Island Restorative Justice out there, make sure you get it. And the other one is called Citizen Circle. And this is the foundation for what we're going to be discussing. Now, I'll give you a little bit about my background. I was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan. I was a little thug, and ended up doing a lot of crazy stuff. But I was very, very blessed that didn't put me into the system. You know, for people that helped me out were community members, and they made sure they kept me in check. Back in the day, I was telling Mother Dorothy that I didn't like them giving my life back then, but I had the whole community kept little Morris Jenkins in check. And if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here. Another thing about me, I am a recovering defense lawyer. I like to put that out. And I'm a defense lawyer that's in recovery. So it's a blessing to be here. The topic today is restorative justice and how it relates to the entry. And both of those articles kind of illustrate that. But I want you to think the symbolism in that. If I'm going to probably offend some people, but don't get offended. I'm a dog on everybody. Because when you talk about criminal justice, which I believe is the oxymoron, you know, think about it. Criminal justice. What is justice? Anybody know what the symbol of justice is? Yeah. Not the scale. The scales is the law. There's that lady. Lady Justice. The law of a master. I'll put it like that. Who made the law for white dudes back in the day? Yeah. But justice is a little bit different than law. And so if you look at all of this stuff, and I really want y'all to look at how we do things in society today. We have lawyers. We have social workers. We have corrections officers. We have the police, among others. And what are their roles? I really want you to take a look at this. Look at the name of what we call our prisons. It's the Department of Corrections. You don't have rehabilitation in the name. So their primary focus isn't to rehabilitate. Their primary focus is to correct. And we talk about police. I tell my students, we got a lot of folks that are thinking about being it. I said, what's your role in society? Everybody come up to protect and serve. No. You're there to enforce the law. And there's a couple of court cases, if you want to talk about that, I tell you the court cases that illustrate that. Their role is not to protect and serve. Their role is to arrest people, and specifically to arrest Black and brown and poor people and put them into corrections. Social workers. I know I got a few out here, but I'm not going to talk about you too bad. But if you look at the mission statements of social work departments all across the nation, they're not there to protect the children. They're there to reunite the family. And everyone don't have that mission. So if a daddy is abusing their kid, their primary focus is to get the daddy to stop abusing so they can take the kid back even though the dad is still amusing. And so even social workers, and I'm not indicting all social workers because I know there are a lot of good people who are social workers, there are a lot of good people who are lawyers. There's about 2 or 3 good people who are cops. And so, when we talk about this, I want you to keep that in mind because restorative justice isn't that. Restorative justice is what it says, and it's justice. And so, when you look at our traditional criminal justice system, I'm going to test y'all out to see if you can do this. I want you to tell me, anybody, in any criminal case, who's the victim? Who is the victim? Let's say, if I say hypothetically speaking, Dr. Jenkins killed somebody. What's her name? Marcella. We're going to use her. I just shot Marcella. Boom! Who's the victim? Anybody?
The people.
Huh?
The people. I said
The
the
people.
taxpayers.
Who?
I said the taxpayers.
Anybody else? Who's the victim, man? She would be. Yeah, she would be. Anybody else?
The shooter.
The shooter? No, But think about it. I want you to look at cases and look and pay particular attention. Everybody's saying the people,
I'm saying her family.
the family.
The state.
What's that?
It's the state.
Oh, you in my class. Because look, when you're supposed to take somebody to court, it's always the state versus the defendant. So the state is the victim, not you, the dead, not the family. Now, that's changed a bit because of restorative justice, and I'll mention a little bit about that later on. But we are taught in all of our schools, the victim is the state. And is that something that we should change? And I argue that we should change that. Because I believe, somebody mentioned the people over there. Now, in California, they call it the people versus whatever, but still the state. But I believe that we, the people, should take the power back and to deal with all of these issues that we deal with every day. And restorative justice is just one tool. Now, for folks who didn't read it, I'll talk a little bit about restorative justice. And restorative justice is simply a process, and there's many, many processes. It's not just one thing. I'll mention one of them today when we talk about reentry. So it's a lot of different things. But the whole primary focus of restorative justice is not to punish. It is not to really help the victim, to be honest. It's there to restore the relationship that occurs between the victim, the offender, and the community. Now, what I mean by restore the relationship, that's what happens most of the times when you see a lot of things that we call crime, or a lot of things that we call delinquency, or even a civil case if you want to sue somebody. The primary focus of the law is to do something else. The primary focus of restorative justice is to repair that relationship. And I got trained many, many times and many years ago, first of all, by the Mennonites in Pennsylvania that trained me in victim offender mediation. Then I was trained in restorative justice. I got training, so some of the hours of training I got is crazy. I was trained by people from New Zealand, Australia, Nigeria, Ghana, Native Americans, and all of these cultures use this thing called restorative justice. And so when I was listening to some of these folks, I said, this sounds very, very familiar that what we did even back in Detroit back in the day. Now, I'm always done it, so, I was pretty long time towards time I wasn't even invented yet. And so back then, I was doing things that would land me into the system back then, but who took care of me? The mama, the person on the streets, the neighbors, the preacher, even the cops back then wouldn't arrest you. They would tell somebody, and then little boys would get his little behind me. But they didn't put me into the system. But for that, I would have had a record. And that's what restorative justice is all about, is to get us there to repair the relationships that occur because of these problems. And so I thought about it and I said, man, this kind of reminds me of this old concept of community raised the kid. And that's true. That is true. You know, like with me, you know, they say, the preacher used to tell them, God likes babies and fools. And I showed up wasn't a baby. And so the process that we used back then was for the fool. Make sure that we are held accountable, number one. And secondly, that we have been brought back into the community. And so I thought about it. And I was born and raised in Detroit, but my daddy and mama are from South Carolina. My mom's from a little town called Orangeburg, South Carolina, in the middle of the state. And my dad is from like the coast of South Carolina. Now out there, we got this thing called people who call it colored people. I'm a descendant, proud descendant of the Gullers. And so they had a process. And if you don't know about the Gullers, real quickly, there are islands that start in North Carolina all the way down to the northern part of Florida. And for folks who are of African descent, that's where we came to this country. It's through the Gullah Island. Because the slave trade was there. If you ever get a chance, go down to Charleston and Beaufort, South Carolina, and go to the Sea Islands, and you can see what I'm talking about. But back then, y'all heard of Hilton Head? That's a resort now. They stole that. That was a Gullah Island. I'm an ex-Army and I'm an ex-Marine. You ever heard of it? The Paris Island? South Carolina, that's where they did the basic training for a lot of the Marines. I didn't mind the holidays. I was a California Marine. And so that was also the Gullah Islands. But on the Gullah Islands, they did not resolve disputes the way we did on the mainland. They said we had the just law and the unjust law. And they said we ain't going to use the unjust law. What they meant by the unjust law was the law I was taught in law school. We used the just law. And for the Gullah people, they did their things in these things called praise house. In these praise houses, if someone did something, a crime or delinquent, or stole something from somebody or hurt somebody, they would take them to the elders in the praise house, and they would come up with a procedure to deal with the problem. They weren't there to punish the dude. They want to make sure that it gets restored into the community. And so, how did they do it? So think about it. We, as a people, and we kind of do it too, and we use the process of restorative justice for this conference. Think about it. What's the first thing that we did? We ate it. Think about it. I mean, our funeral, what else would we do? We eat. All this stuff starts because we have this fellowship. That's what it is. I don't care if you're Christian, Muslim, Jewish, atheist. You have this process as a part of your culture. That is the essence of restorative justice. And I believe that is essence of trying to deal with this concept what we call reentry. And it should be grounded in this concept of restorative justice. And so, back to the Gullah Islands, what they would do is take these and if I remember, the praise house, they didn't have no air conditioning. And it's like a little shack. It was like a little outhouse. And then I witnessed one of the processes. This dude, he took some okra or something from somebody, and the person that owned the okra got mad and said, okay, we got to deal with this because I don't want to kill you. So we're going to go to the praise house, and they got together, they ate, and they shrimp and rice. That's what they eat a lot. That's some good stuff. I'm telling you. And so we ate some of that, and they said, we're going to do this process. And I'm sitting there, like me being I was a junior lawyer back then. I said, yeah, I can deal with this. And when they took them in there, the elder said, I want you to, first, we're going to send you to a process. They said, we want you to pick up a bean seed. A bean seed is something like a sesame seed. We want you to pick up that bean seed with your nose in order to start the process. I'm sitting there. I said, honey, what's going to do this? I said, I asked him, I put over his head, you want him to snort it? I got some coke in my thing. Maybe they can do nothing to that. But it wasn't that he had to snort. He had to really literally pick it up with his nose. And it took him a while. I was sitting in there. I'm like, dang, when are you going to do this? He was trying. The seed kept dropping, but it was hot. and he started to sweat. And when he sweat, he went down and got the beanie seed. That started the process. And then they got together to come up with a resolution. And so that's something that they did on the Gullah Islands. And again, they're still doing it. Not to the extent that we're doing today, but that still has some of these things that are happening in the Gullah Islands. The other thing about it, I like to go do a little bit of history. Y'all know where the 40 acres and a mule came from? How many think this should deserve 40 acres and a mule? Where you from? Where your people from?
You say, what did you say now?
Where your people from? What part of the country?
Right here. They're from right here. Yeah.
Right, Tennessee? Nah, you don't get it.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Where your people from?
That's another.
Huh? I had y'all like
Illinois.
no. What? Huh? Mississippi. No, not you Mississippians. Y'all don't supposed to get it. Now, it's in the article. And I like to throw that out for people to think about.
What about Charleston, South Carolina?
Yeah, baby. They made the general, his name was General Sherman. They didn't know what to do with the slaves, because the slave owners, they hauled butt. They said, we're getting out of here, the Union don't shoot us. And the slaves were sitting there, well, what can we do? And he said, we're going to give you an executive order. He had Lincoln put an executive order. And guess what? If you're from the Gullah Islands, you deserve 40 acres and a mule. That's where it came from. So I tell folks now, I want my 40 acres and a mule. But I don't know what to do with a mule, so I want me a Lexus. And I don't need 40 acres, so I asked for Madison Square Gardens. And so that's where it came from. Did we get it? No. But that's the whole notion of what the Gullah Islands were all about. And if anybody saw, it's that Glory, the movie, you remember they were marching, this little kid came up and didn't understand what he was saying. That was a Gullah person trying to talk to him. I think Morgan Freeman knew it. But Denzel said, what did he say? Because there's a whole notion of a language that we use there that's a lot different than we use here in Illinois or where I'm from, Detroit. Can I offend you a little bit, man? You cool? Yeah. Okay. What if I called you a bucko? Would you be mad or sad? You know what it is? Yeah. No. Anybody know what a bucko is? Buckra. Buckra. It down there. I went down there and called you a buckra in South Carolina. It would kill me. Because that's an offensive term that's used by ex-slaves because we have this language down there. We're going to call the master a buck. It's a derogatory term. You call the other terms that we use over here wasn't derogatory. They say, call me a hunky all you want, but don't call me a bucker because that's part of the language. There's a lot of things. If you get a chance, please go down there and got the language of Gullah that they had. And not the young folks. Y'all saw that show, the kids show called Gullah Gullah Island. That was something that was from the island. And you had the frog that was named Binion. Binion are Gullah people that were living there. I'm not a Binion. The frog was a Binion because he was there. I'm a Cumya. A Cumya is somebody that left and came back. Yeah, in the term, kumbaya. That's what it's about. They're bringing folks back to the community to commune. So that's what the Gullah Islands, and it's not unique to the Gullah Islands. I'm joking around with you Mississippians and Arkansas folks. Y'all have these processes too. The same thing was occurring in all of our communities. That's what Afrocentric, I believe Afrocentric restorative justice is all about. And on the back of the article, I want you to take a look if you got it. There's a chart. And when I say Afrocentric, don't believe it's just simply because you're of African descent that you are a person that uses Afrocentric theory. Not many people do it. In fact, we are all educated in here. But anybody in here that's been educated, I don't care if you went to Southern Illinois University, Michigan State, Claflin College like I went to in South Carolina, or Morehouse, we were all taught Eurocentric. Everybody. And in order to be, and this is not unique to any culture, but this is a part of the model that's used when we talk about should something be culturally specific. And I argue it should be, because in many cultures, we have a worldview. And a worldview of Eurocentrism, when it comes to dealing with crime, is to deal with crime through the courts. What do they want to do? They want to punish. That's Eurocentric. That came out of Western Europe. Common law came out of Western Europe. And so their worldview is a lot different than many worldviews of other cultures. The other model is enculturated. That's what we tend to think of. When enculturated is not culturally specific. Like mediation falls under an enculturated model, because who solves a dispute is the people that's involved in it. However, it is not culturally specific. Culturally specific adds one other element. Like a mediation is the people, parties that are involved in it. What's missing? Community. Restorative justice under the Afrocentric model and many other culturally specific models adds the community into this process. And that's important, because who knows what's going on? It's basically the community. Does the state know, really? No, we had processes that we used in many, many cultures. We did one that was called a victim impact panel. I think it was in Philadelphia. And we had kids, they go through this process, and you got an option. The kids say, I'm going to go through this panel that's composed of women from my community, or you can go to the courts. So the delinquents said, I ain't going to that panel, because the people in the panel do exactly what they're doing. And I know a lot of y'all know this. I thought some classes do this. They say, I'm going to BS the professor, because they don't know what's going on. But their peers and the community knew what was going on. And that's why those kids chose the courts, because they could BS the courts. And so they chose that rather than being a part of a panel. Because the community, and I define community different. I believe community is simply a geographical location. Community sometimes, and I believe this should be defined by culture. A lot of us go to church. That's part of your community. I'm a proud member of Phi Beta Sigma. I got the sister Vega out there. I saw, all right. I saw some AKAs in here too. I've been watching this. That's your community too. Even though we're from various parts, that's a part of this. And you can define it any way you want. I argue we can define it culture. Values. Generally, in society, especially the U.S. society, we're more individualistic. In a lot of cultures, specifically the African American culture, I call myself African American. I forgot to tell you that I'm a black dude from Detroit. I ain't putting American in there until America treats me right. And so I think that our value system is more communal rather than individualistic. And I did surveys to see whether or not that was true, and it is true. I'm like, hey. Then it published that. The white publicist said, we ain't putting that out there. That nature of people also is a part of it. Generally, we talk about to our criminal justice folks, we say, oh, it's a bad seed. Under Afrocentric theory, no, people do bad things. I'm not saying people do bad things or not do bad things. Yeah, they do a lot of bad things. But generally, people in our culture say that individuals are naturally good. So the nature of people is that. And then epistemology for my future scholars out there, how do we prove something is working? We use the scientific method. But where did that come from? Does it impact? How do we learn things in our cultures a lot of times? Remember that oral culture that goes on? That's part of the process that we know whether or not something is working. Is recidivism the end all and be all for reentry? No, it isn't. We want people to be a better human being. But how do you measure that? That's part of Afrocentric theory. And we're still working on that. how do we measure whether something is working? And so we do it by using a methodology that's much different than the methodology that comes out of our higher institutions. That we also count the spirit. Spirit's out there. How do we measure spirit? It's difficult, but it's possible. So those are the things that they use to determine whether it's not something is Afrocentric. Now, like I said before, you don't have to be Black to be a part of the Afrocentric theory. We got a lot of Black folks. I went to one person's name. He's a government person too. His name is Clarence Thomas. He does not use this model, even though he's government. But this model can be used with reference to what we use for reentry. And so the second article talks about citizen circles. And all that is you bring in all the community members in a circle, and we do it in a circle on purpose. Because I know a lot of y'all been in court, so you know where's the judge in the courtroom? Way up there. Where's the victim? Way down there. They're not in the victim, it's the witness. Where's the defendant? Way down there. In a circle, everybody's equal. So you bring in the community. And so you're there not to judge a person in the citizen circles. You are there to help that individual develop their strengths. One thing that we found out, you can bring in cops, preachers, victims advocates, all that, bring a whole lot. But the one thing that we found out by doing this, and it was in Ohio, we couldn't come in. I couldn't come in as Dr. J. I couldn't come in as a lawyer or a Ph.D. The cops couldn't come in as being a cop. The preacher couldn't wear the thing. They couldn't come in as a preacher. We started the circle off by buying food. There was fellowship, and everybody in the circle starts talking about what that individual who's been being brought in, the strengths are. And a lot of times we found this out that a lot of the folks that came into the circle never had anything positive said about it. And everybody, almost everybody, I was going to say almost everybody has strengths. I just thought about Donald Trump, but that's another issue. I don't know if he has any strengths. But most everybody has strengths. But they never heard about their strengths. They didn't know that they had the ability to be a scholar. They didn't know that they had the ability to do whatever they can do. And so by doing that, and we got to develop trust. It takes a while. You learn from each other. We learn how alike we are. We learn about other folks' culture, what they bring to the table. That's what Citizen Circle is all about. The other thing about the circle that's in this article, it was brought to the attention of the community by the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction. And they realized that they couldn't do it either. So they said, look, we want to give it back to the community. And the community came up with this process. And by doing this process, it helps not only the so-called offender or the returning citizen, it's not only the victim, but it also impacted the community. And who we brought in to the circle was non-believers. We got Joe Sixpack. We had people, drug dealers. We had gangbangers that came to the circle. And by doing that, it helped not only the victim and the offender, but it helped the community. So I think, and that we use the Afrocentric theory as a foundation. And you can use this theory in all communities. You got to remember, when we talk about, statistically, we talk about crime. Who commits crimes on whom? Racially, blacks on black, right? White people on white people. Hispanics on Hispanics. Middle Eastern on Middle Eastern. That's something. That's a community. That's my argument, that culture, ethnicity, race, or however you want to define it, should be the foundation of how we deal with crime and delinquency. So if you get a chance, read my article. I like it too. That's one of my first one. But also read the Citizen Circle article. It kind of lays out the foundation for how we deal with the interest. And you got to come in. Remember Quincy Jones brought all those people to do We Are the World? What was the first thing he told the folks? Michael Jackson, Lionel Richie, Diana Ross said, leave that BS behind outside. We're going to all do this together. That's what citizen service is about. So you leave. Yeah, I'm still a lawyer. I'm still a Ph.D. You leave that behind. Now, you bring your expertise if someone wants to get that expertise. They'll find out later on, and then network to find out what they can do. And we had success out of that as well. Some of the folks that went through are now some of my fellow lawyers. We got some that's now one of them medical doctor now. And because of that, they found something. They planted that seed. It didn't happen overnight. You got that seed planted that they were somebody that would do this. And so I'm hoping that we can spread the word about this and get this thing going. I'm also hoping that this is the end all and be all. We learn from each other. How can we improve on Afrocentric restorative justice? How can we improve on citizen service? And there are many, many other things too, but only had a short period of time. And so, another thing about my background, next month, not next month, the month after, you have Black Caucus coming out. And at Lewis, we have to start in San Quentin. And
Could you put the mic up a little?
Oh, I'm sorry. If I get a mic, I might start singing. I want to be David Russell. But as we do Black August, and it's not the second time we're doing it, we're looking at getting information. We have people in the facilities that are part of it. We got returning citizens. We got scholars. We got people from the community. My role, I got the last role. At the end of Black August, they got a comedy out. And so I'm an amateur stand-up. And so I end up doing a comedy routine on Black August. And this is the killer part. Last year I did it, and my whole routine, because I want to make this clear to my brothers and brothers out here, specifically, not y'all sisters, not that I don't love you, but brothers, please get checked out for prostate cancer. I did my whole comedy routine on prostate cancer. I'm a prostate cancer survivor. And that's something that you all should get checked out. And your sisters out there, I don't know much about it because I ain't got no boobs. Breast cancer. That's important. That's important to look at. So as you go along, think about that. And so thanks again for letting me have this few minutes to talk a little trash. It's nice to be what I am now. I used to do this back in the day, but now I get paid to stand in front of students and talk trash. And so that's what it's all about. And hopefully I planted a little nugget in there so you can take this and go with it. Go with it. Yeah, please. Any questions, critiques, criticism, then anything. I'll answer any question you want. Except for if you got a legal question, you got to pay this. But everything else, I'll answer anything. I'm very open book too.
What made you want to be a lawyer?
Okay. Oh, that's a good question. There's a couple of things that happened. While I was in the United States Army, I got a question. Have you ever seen MASH, that show? Yes. I was like that. They had my Hawaiian shirt on, and they tried to court martial me. And I got off on the technicality. I said, that's something to think about. But then I went to law school, and my torts professor told me, you ain't going to be a good lawyer. He saw something in me. He said, nah, you shouldn't go into law. You know what you should be? A law professor. Now, you're crazy, man. Because I want to be the first Black Terry Mason. And I found out that torts professor, he's a white dude who looked like Kenny Rogers. It sounded like it too. Couldn't sing like Kenny Rogers, but he looked like it. And he told me that some years ago, and then I found out that was my call. And so that was the reason why I wanted to be a lawyer. Any other ones? Feel free. Nobody wants to ask me a question. I have a question. We talk more about Black Caucus. Well, Black Caucus gets a movement started by inmates in California to free the political prisoners that are part of the system. And so it started in the prisons, and then it went to higher education, and then it went to community. And many communities now are celebrating Black August, and the primary focus is to change the system. My small part academically in Black August is to get rid of the slavery provision in the 13th Amendment. Because slavery is still legal if you're an Indian in most jurisdictions. And I'm moving in that. And other folks are doing other things, like the abolishment of the death penalty, the reform of criminal justice. Those things happen during Black August. And again, the founding fathers of this were individuals who were inmates. And I just send you some information if you want. And we zoom some of the stuff too.
Thank you, Dr. Jim.
Thank you.
Let's give him some love.